going on, everybody? I'm Max Kellerman. Welcome to this Just in a Fast Hour around the world of sports and how I see it. And we begin with the end of the Nets season. The New York Post with a headline today, Netmare. After opening the season as title favorites, the Nets find themselves at home after just 4 games of NBA postseason. Swept by Boston, of all places, in Brooklyn. KD finally got going in Game 4, but it proved too little, too late. Here is KD and Kyrie post-game.
No regrets. I mean, it happens. You know, no crying over spilled milk. It's about how we can progress and get better from here. We can't have no regrets on what we did. It just played out the way it played.
I felt like I was letting the team down at a point where I wasn't able to play, and I think it became a distraction at times. And as you see, we just had some drastic changes. But now we just turn the page and look forward to what we're building as a franchise and really get tougher.
Full house today to talk the Nets collapse. Thank you for joining me, JJ Reddick and Monica McNutt, of course. JJ, you just heard what Kyrie had to say, letting the team down and everything, and how Durant doesn't have any regrets this season and all this. I guess that's a step toward taking responsibility, right? At least acknowledging your personal choices had a professional impact. What's your biggest reason as to why the Nets are sitting at home right now?
Their roster construction, and I've said this for weeks now. When you get to the playoffs, and Boston did this time and time again, you target matchups. And outside of Kevin Durant, the guys that play on the Brooklyn Nets are point guards and centers. What do the Boston Celtics have? They have a bunch of big two-way wing defenders. What do the Miami Heat have? The same. Milwaukee Bucks, Phoenix Suns, Golden State Warriors. You go down the list. This is what you need in the NBA. You need wing defenders. You need two-way players. And to me, this entire season is a bit of a cautionary tale about imbalanced roster construction in trying to fit superstars together. The Lakers and the Nets, the 2 preseason favorites to win a championship, both severely underachieved this year.
I take a step back from that, though, right? And even take like a more macro view. To me, it looks like an issue, Monica, for so long now. It's like grab superstars in the NBA. But when I look at where that's worked, the Lakers back in the day with Pat Riley as head coach, they grabbed Shaquille O'Neal, whoever. Recently, or more recently, in Miami, Wade had already won. It's a Pat Riley organization. Right. He brings his guys in. Even then, they had to learn to win.
Yes.
Right? But when it's just been, hey, let's throw these group of guys together, it hasn't worked the same way, has it?
It hasn't. And, it's funny, Max, because last night as I had to do my Twitter walk of shame with Celtics fans because I thought the Nets would find a way to win, someone pointed out, and I thought this tweet was great, that when this came together and the announcement was made that Kyrie would be allowed to participate on a part-time basis, the first thing I said is you cannot cheat the process. And that, to me, has been sort of the culmination of what has happened in the collapse of this Brooklyn Nets squad. Whether you talk about Kyrie's availability or you just talk about the idea that you just throw these superstars together and you don't acknowledge what you need to support them sincerely, here we are. And now I will say this. I think outside of the Bucks and the Celtics, I do wonder that if Kyrie and KD could have found a way versus some of those other teams, just when you think of the size differential versus
to win
Miami.
a series.
To not get swept is where I'm at now.
Okay.
Like, the goalpost has even moved in a little closer to not get swept. I do think that Boston legit, in terms of the athletes that they have in the scheme, was the worst matchup that the Nets could have drawn.
Yeah, it's almost like, though, that there's something inside the Nets that isn't working, right? Like, there were 3 games they should have won, in my opinion, and yet by the 4th game, it was like, they don't want it bad enough. They're not cohesive enough. They will figure out a way to lose this game. JJ, is that something that the media, guys like me, just make up? It's like a Hollywood script. Until the characters can figure out their emotional arc, the action can't. But it does seem to me to be the case on teams where they can't figure it out internally, whose team is it and all that kind of stuff. They don't seem to advance. Wade had to tell LeBron, this got to be you, right? Right or wrong?
Listen, there is some existential component to this. And this is what makes basketball so beautiful. It is, to me, the ultimate team sport. You need 5 guys in cooperation, working together, competing at the highest level. The Nets, unfortunately, didn't have that for pretty much the entire season. And that's disappointing. That's really disappointing.
How much of that is the coach? Because remember when Kyrie was like, hey, sometimes I'll be the coach. Sometimes we don't really need a coach. Steve Nash is our friend, right? Okay, they got assistants on other teams now who are killing the game in Boston, in Milwaukee, like coaches who coach them up.
Ooh. Listen, the one inkling of grace silver lining that I have been trying to cook up on behalf of Steve Nash is when you look at what this team did during the regular season. They were an isolation basketball team, right? So I think it's for Kevin Durant, there's something like 21 possessions of ISO that they ran, right? And then here it is. So the 21, and then in the playoffs it goes up to 25 per 100 possessions. To me, you cannot magically come up with a new identity in the playoffs, right? Like we kept hollering, Steve Nash needs to make adjustments. He needs to make adjustments. The only adjustment was how do we get KD going? It winds up looking like more isolation opportunities. And so the reality of who this team was came to fruition again versus the worst possible matchup that they could have drawn.
That's you're 100% correct.
Okay, but?
I talked to no.
Oh, there's no but. Okay.
There's no but. I talked to Stephen A. about this on First Take today. What coach in this series against the Boston Celtics with this roster could do better?
Yeah.
I don't think the answer is Mark Jackson or Jeff. Like, to me, it's no one. No one. They were completely outmatched. It was a terrible matchup for the Brooklyn Nets.
They were also a bit snake bit, right? Like Kyrie with the vaccine, so they played in half the games. They couldn't get into a rhythm. And KD, since the Achilles, defensively is not the same. There have been some other injuries. And Ben Simmons didn't play at all, right? Like, they also ran into a bit of bad luck, didn't they?
Well, if you look at Nash's 2 years as the head coach, I mean, look at this. KD's coming off an Achilles injury. Spencer Dinwiddie tears his ACLs. Kyrie takes a sabbatical. Kyrie gets hurt in the playoffs. James gets hurt with his hamstring last year.
Yeah.
Then this year, James, is not himself. He wants out. Ben is unavailable, the guy they traded for. Kyrie is unavailable for most of the season. This 2-year era of Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets has had zero continuity. It's not on him.
All right. Does it get fixed?
Well, look, truthfully, Ben Simmons solves some of those problems defensively. Joe Harris solves some of those problems.
Yeah, Joe Harris is another big hit.
That was a huge hit. He's 6'6", as opposed to, look, Patty Mills is a great player. He's 6'2".
Even when he wasn't shooting in the playoffs last year, he was defending.
Seth Curry, Patty Mills, Kyrie Irving. Those are 3 undersized guards.
Guys still got good. Listen to the names you're talking about. They got a roster. Whatever you say,
It's imbalanced, though.
Listen,
it's imbalanced.
And if they all show up to go through their process, I still think you cannot write this organization off right now. If they get people healthy and on the floor.
This just in. Bulls star Zach LaVine has entered the league's COVID health and safety protocols, which means he is questionable for, I should call it a winner go-home game 5, but it's just a go-home game 5 in Milwaukee Wednesday. Let's face it. We'll keep you updated as this